All right, we're back. Uh, just finished moving. Still haven't unpacked everything. So yeah, right now I'm not really working on any assets, but I still want to put something out. So I'm gonna do a quick little walkthrough on my own little texturing process. I can't really say this is common practice. There's a pattern I've fallen into when it comes to my workflow. My pipeline for the Unreal Marketplace assets, Sketchfab assets, and any personal game development work. After some talks with some colleagues and stuff, I don't think it's something I see most people do. And after working with students for a few months, I'm not even sure it's something people even teach. So here's some steps I take to make sure I stick to proper PBR values for certain materials and textures, whether it's Unreal Engine, Blender, can be applied to Unity, Quixel Mixer, etc. I wouldn't call this industry standard, but the industry is always in a constant state of flux. And with the whole world of artists and developers, this is bound to be subject to change over time. It's case to case. This is my personal standard, how I usually do things. As an artist, I think you should have your own personal standard. Because if you just do what the industry does, we'll never innovate, we'll never get change, we'll never advance. So here's a little quick overview on how I do things for my store and my assets and my games. So I'm going to talk to you guys about Unreal Vision, term that I don't think anyone has ever said. Pretty sure I'm the guy that made the term up. So we'll be learning how to go from Painter to Blender to Unreal, and maybe we'll see some other things. Take a break from the marketplace. We'll be back in January. But first, this video is made possible by me. Yeah, I don't have a real sponsor, but I wouldn't have the time or resources to do this had it not been for the support provided by my own products and the people that buy them. I might be a little biased, but we got some great products on the store, and if you check them out on the release of this video, it's Black Friday. You can save up to 75% on our assets, may it be ghoulish monsters, stylish new looks, or a robot army of your own. We have a bit of everything. It's hard finding affordable assets for your projects. If you want to check it out, you just might find the exact thing you need for your project. And with that out of the way, let's head back into the video. Alright, I found myself answering this question a lot. Why do my materials look different in Unreal when they're fine in Painter? Let's talk about that. PBR values seems to be a thing I see most people misunderstand when working in a software-to-software pipeline. Things can and look different depending on where you're taking it from. Not all rendering engines are made equal. Understanding those differences is really important in figuring out why textures look the way they do. So real quick, we're gonna take a look at these PBR charts. This one's for Unity. As you can see, like, there's specific ranges that are highlighted here for different kinds of materials. These areas here are for metals, and over here would already be non-metal, right? For specular, it's a little different, but for metallic, it's a little more straightforward. Black is not metal, white is metal. So it's case to case. It's not always going to be like that because, you know, as an artist, you're going to be able to take artistic liberties with what you do with your materials. And smoothness or roughness values, well, this is just smoothness because it's going from black being rough to white being smooth. So, you know, unless it's like case to case, really, I don't think you're ever really going to go under this 0.1 scale, from 0.1 to maybe 0.9. 1 is not going to be, there's nothing that's truly completely smooth. Like unless you're making like a window or like a reflective material, like that works. Something like a mirror, but again, it's like it depends what you're really going for on whether you can break the rules or not. So here's another PBR guide from Joey Lens. I'm gonna have links to all these in the description, so you guys can check them out for yourself. But like, this is a PBR guide he made for Unreal 4 to assist with production and share reference material. You can see forged iron. He has like certain values that they can just like type into the ranges so they can get exactly what they want. You know, these values, they work for whatever projects you're working on too. So if you want to check them out, it'll definitely help figure out some values that you might need for your project. This is the Quixel Mixer chart guide. So showing you metallic roughness, which is the pipeline I usually work with. This would be the black value, and this would be going into white. So completely smoothed out to completely roughed out. This is the metallic values going from black to white, which would be black being 0, which would be non-metal, and then white, which is 1, aka metal. And this is showing how the metalness would look depending on how rough it is. I usually stick within this range, just this square in here. That's all you're really gonna need when you're texturing in Painter. So yeah, so I'll link all these in below, like I said. PBR charts, there's all kinds of charts you can find. So I'm just gonna like go into Painter and Blender real quick and show you guys. Right off the bat, you can tell big difference between Painter and Blender. Their rendering engines are, you know, this is Eevee, and Blender uses, Painter uses Iblis, or what's it called? I think it's Iblis. So as you can see, you have a bit more of a brighter value here and a bit darker here. But the point is that you're never really going to get the same result in two different engines. The way I go about texturing is that I usually go in grayscale, but focus on the contrasting values of all the colors rather than the saturation or anything. Obviously, bloom is what changes here, because this post-process, so I don't really play that much with bloom in Painter. It doesn't really do much other than add some lens flares to it. But yeah, as you can see, the roughness values, they're a little different across Blender and Painter. So it's a bit shinier. Well, I'd say it's a bit shinier here in Painter, while it's a bit more well, I'd say they're about the same amount of shine, but the color management is the differentiating factor here. Look, even if we switch the cycles, it's still going to be a little darker. But yeah, as you can see, there's like a ton of different settings you can play with to make sure it's matching up to what you want. I typically don't care how it looks in Blender unless I'm actually making something for Blender, like a little short animation, like a bumper for an ad or something, or an intro to a video. I usually care how it looks in Unreal. It's a few steps you have to take to make sure it looks. Change it to A/B so we can see stuff happen. So Can't really see the difference in the metal that much, but in roughness is where it starts to show. See, it's just completely like darkened the value, so it's like a more reflective surface now. But we change it back to non-color, and we get a more accurate representation of the texture in Blender. And same for the normal map, which is usually just like sRGB, but you know, looks so weird. So we change it to non-color, and our normals are appearing correctly. That's the few steps you actually have to take to make it look like Painter, or to make sure that Painter looks the way you want it, to make sure you get the results you want from Painter. I mean, like, ultimately, you can just, like, this is why I'm saying that I want to help you develop your vision. Sometimes you'll make something that looks weird in Painter, but it's going to look fine once you get it into whatever software you need it in. You know, it's developing that vision. This is going to be mostly focused for Unreal Engine. The gist of it, the concept of these ideas, that you are able to sort of get a feel and a view of what you think your textures are going to look like once they get into a different software. Understanding the differences between rendering engines and how you can take advantage of those differences and maximize your creativity. Like, one thing is that never go too dark with your color values. Granted, this is pretty dark, but it's still in the range where it's like fine for PBR values, you know? Because often you'll go into Unreal Engine, if you put something that's too dark on your base color, it's not going to render properly, and it's going to be more like a charcoal. You know, it's going to be completely light absorbent. Same thing if you put something white, and it's going to be like it's glowing. You don't really want that to happen. It's going to mess up with your lighting. It's going to mess up with your materials. For like darker scenes, you don't really want like this super bright thing that's basically illuminating that area. Your roughness values, again, getting too dark on certain things is just gonna mess it up. Cause like, I want this guy to be more like a worn out robot. So like, I don't want him to be completely roughed out. I wanted to have smoother areas, but I really don't let myself get any darker than this. And the white values, you see how it's not completely white? It's just like, it's a brighter gray, you know? You want to stick in that sweet spot of the gray values, because, again, getting too bright on your texture values is just going to completely mess that up. I know what it looks like, because this is what the model looks like in Painter, without any post-process effects. So, since I mostly work on Unreal Engine, the way I go on my texture isn't exactly straightforward. There's lots of ways to do it, but this is how I approach it. In Painter, when I open a new file, I typically start out by checking some settings in my post-process. I try not to get too carried away since it can affect my work, but the most important settings I find are the tone mapping and shadows. First I enable shadows, lower the intensity a bit, and then I move on to tone mapping, which is set to automatic. As you can see, it makes my scene darker, but this is actually a lot closer to what you'll be seeing in Engine. It really helps when you're trying to match your values to what you'll need in Engine. It closes the gap, and it just makes the trade-off between texture artists and technical artists a lot smaller. And that's just the first step to developing your Unreal Vision. And the Vignette, I'll turn that on too, because, I don't know, it makes it easier on the eyes. So yeah, this is still not 100% what it looks like in game. Painter renders things differently than Unreal Engine, and this is what it looks like in Unreal. This is the default version of my material applied to the character. As you can see, it's not as rough as it is in Painter. It's not as intensive. It's not as smooth as it is in Painter for this area here. And the darker areas, you know, again, it looks really smooth in Painter, but here it's a lot more rough. Like, it's covered in dirt and grime, which is exactly what I was going for. And obviously, the bloom, that's just an effect here. You can tone that round. If you just put it to 1, it's sort of how it looks like in Painter. As you can see, no changes here. Just that's how I usually go about it when I'm transferring the values to Unreal Engine. Like I really like texturing metal, so that's why I want to explain this, because I've been seeing a lot of people lately work with metal. I felt like there's like a knowledge gap happening right now where like people aren't really understanding how these values work and how they can be adjusted to get the result you need. Every rendering engine has its own way of getting the images, so naturally your results are going to look a little different, whether it's Blender, Painter, Quixel, Unity, or Unreal, which is why it's important to develop your vision for these projects. The concept at its core is just about understanding different softwares and how they render materials and how to translate it according. I've seen a lot of people not understand basic PBR, very confused where when heading into Unreal Engine from Painter. Why are my textures too dark? Why are my textures too light? That's because in Unreal's eyes, they are. So hopefully this video helped. I'll do another video on how I texture, but right now I just wanted to explain what goes through my head when I'm thinking about PBR values in Painter, Blender, and Unreal Engine. I really think it's not something that's talked about enough. I wanted to make something more in depth than just a tutorial, because in the end, like you can make anything if you want. You don't just learn principles out of nowhere. It comes from experience. It comes from working, and it comes from practice. I thought I'd share this to help others make it through and learn the things I took so long to learn myself. Hopefully this helps, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.